1993. The 1990s was seen as one of the most influential times in modern day history, especially when it came to the realm of entertainment. 1993 carried on where the previous 3 years had left off. There were plenty of very memorable gems released this year in particular, some bad, but the rest were mostly good. And as I've said in previous videos, it's very difficult indeed to get through every single thing in a particular year, so I will just highlight some of my personal favourites whilst giving out mentions to the hottest topics of 1993. 1993 was an excellent year for Hollywood in terms of its movie releases, and whilst researching I was actually blown away at some of the excellent films that came out this year. This just solidified why the 1990s was such a great decade in terms of entertainment, and personally, the best ever decade, as I grew up in it and I got to witness all of these firsthand. We start off with Jurassic Park, the story about a theme park created by multi-millionaire John Hammond, featuring live dinosaurs as its main attraction. Now things go horribly wrong when a tropical storm, paired with an inside betrayal, leads to a power shortage and escaped killer dinosaurs, with the visiting tourists on the run for their survival. Jurassic Park surged its way to the top of the box office charts that year, bringing in a whopping $914,691,118, close to $1 billion, and this was only 93. That is impressive even by today's standards, so impressive that it's in the all-time list of highest grossing Hollywood movies ever, and then 2 of its sequels, Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, ranking in at number 6 and number 15 respectively, both also in the all-time grossing lists. Robin Williams blew up the screen as only he could with the very funny but heartfelt comedy Mrs. Doubtfire. In this movie, Williams has been divorced from his wife and as a result doesn't get to see his kids as often as he would like. So when an advert for a nanny appears, Williams decides to take matters into his own hands and dresses up as a middle-aged Scottish woman. This leads to various hilarious hijinks, including a funny encounter with future James Bond Pierce Brosnan. Comedy aside, it also sees Williams grow as a person and is even more appreciative of his role as a dad. After a court hearing following his reveal as Mrs. Doubtfire, which has now restricted his access to his kids even further, a compromise is made between him and his wife, allowing him to finally spend more time with his kids, as he's always wanted to do. One of Robin Williams' most solid efforts and a fantastic follow-up from the previous year following his role as the genie in Disney's Aladdin. Harrison Ford at this point in time was already a screen legend, and further added to his legacy in the epic action thriller The Fugitive. He stars as a surgeon who has been framed for the murder of his wife. After being sentenced to death, there is an escape attempt by his fellow inmates, which leads to his exit. But instead of fleeing and going underground, he instead goes to find out who the real murderer is, just to clear his name. And he's doing this whilst being the target of a massive manhunt, led by US Deputy Marshal Tommy Lee Jones. It's all thrills and spills, action, drama and suspense. It's one of 1993's biggest box office attractions.
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
The 90s action heroes took center stage this year with 2 of its biggest attractions in Sly Stallone and Jean-Claude Van-Damme. Sly starred in the futuristic action flick Demolition Man, alongside another 90s action star in Wesley Snipes. After being framed for the murder of the hostages, Stallone along with Snipes is frozen in cryogenic suspension. Snipes has been released first, but it's all part of a plot to take down a local renegade who is challenging the very dystopian San Angeles. Stallone is set free and he is tasked with taking down Snipes. Sandra Bullock also starred alongside the duo in this movie, and this was very early on in her career. She's since gone on to have a legendary successful career. Stallone's second outing was the excellent Cliffhanger. Now I remember watching the trailer to this movie back in the day and being very gripped by what was going to happen next. Watching the movie, I was not disappointed. Stallone stars as a ranger and he is dispatched to save his friend Holland and his girl. Stallone is unsuccessful in saving the girl and he's overcome with guilt, which forces him to take time off from his job. The film takes a turn when a stranded group of ruthless international thieves send a fake distress call, and Stallone, now back with the ranger station, is taken hostage, when he goes to investigate, and he's forced to help the gang locate 3 suitcases totaling to the tune of $100 million. It's an intriguing and gripping movie with a lot of strong violence that keeps you genuinely hooked as to what happens next. Veteran actor John Lithgow from Third Rock from the Sun stars as the psychotic main villain, and he was one of the entertaining spots of the whole movie. Not to be outdone, Jean-Claude Van-Damme pulled double duty this year with Nowhere to Run and my personal favourite Jean-Claude Van-Damme flick, Hard Target. In Nowhere to Run, Van-Damme stars as an escaped convict, and during a chaotic road accident with a bus of inmates, he is aided by his friend Billy, and the two make a getaway. But not before Billy is shot, and Van-Damme has to go solo along with some money he stole as part of a heist. He comes across a nearby house occupied by a woman, Rosanna Arquette, and her 2 kids. Arquette's character is being pressured by a corrupt developer to move off the land, and sends in some heavies just to persuade her to move. Van-Damme saves the family, and they welcome him to stay even though he's a fugitive. The movie sees Van-Damme fall in love with Arquette and the kids. He ends up taking on the corrupt landlord. He makes the ultimate sacrifice, handing himself in to the police, but he promises to return to Arquette and the kids. And in Hard Target, Van-Damme plays a struggling sea merchant who has to fight to stay alive as he's been targeted by a group of hunters who lure victims in a game of survival with a money belt filled with cash, which they get to keep as their reward, and death if they fail. Van-Damme comes to the aid of a young woman, Natasha, who is ambushed by a group of thugs. She's searching for her father and asks Van-Damme to help her find him, who, unbeknownst to her, has fallen prey to the hunters. Van-Damme agrees to help the woman in exchange for a fee to help him pay off his debts. He discovers Natasha's father's death was as a result of the hunt, and not the accident that it was reported to be. Now the target, Van-Damme lures the hunters into an abandoned warhouse in a frantic showdown against the hunters. Lots of guns, explosions, stunts made this a typical 90s JCVD flick, and as I stated earlier, it's my favourite personal Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Now moving away from the action, 1993 saw Bill Murray having to face the same day over and over again in the funny rom-com Groundhog Day. Murray stars as a weatherman, Phil Connors. He is not happy with his job, and what he thinks is his final day gives a less than glowing report on the day's activities. Believing that he is finally on his way to things new, an overnight blizzard forces him to stay in the town, and this is where all the fun begins. He discovers that he is trapped in a time loop and that he's reliving the same day of February the 2nd over and over. He soon becomes familiar with all the activities of the day and then uses it to his advantage, whether it's one-night stands, attempted robbery, and even driving to his death. He then decides to use it to seduce his producer, Rita, played by the stunning Andie MacDowell. After several failed attempts, he finally manages to win her over in the end when he uses his abilities, shall we say, to help others but himself. Rita sees a genuine goodness to him and ends up falling for him. He wakes up on the morning of February the 3rd and with Rita right next to him, and the loop finally been broken, and leaving Phil and Rita to end up living together. It was a feel-good movie with a number of funny moments. I was at an age when I was really into Bill Murray's films, especially during his run on both the original Ghostbusters movies, which has a tie-in of sorts, as Groundhog Day was directed by the late great Harold Ramis, who has a small cameo in the movie. One of my personal favourites came out this year, the hilarious but heartwarming Cool Runnings, a movie about Jamaica's first ever bobsleigh team. It was loosely based on the real-life event of the 1988 Winter Olympics, which saw Jamaica compete in the bobsleigh competition. After failing to qualify for track along with 2 runners, Dries Bannock is determined to go to the Olympics. He realizes that he can only do so by competing in the bobsleigh competition. His late dad was discovered in a picture next to Irv Blitzer, a disgraced bobsleigh winner who wanted to form a team for the Olympics before retiring in disgrace. Dries then seeks out Blitzer, who after initially refusing, agrees to help form the first Jamaica bobsled team. With the help of his best friend Sanka and the two runners he was against during the track qualifiers, the four guys go on to form the first Jamaican bobsled team. The film sees the team face several obstacles, including Blitzer's old coach attempting to sabotage their efforts to qualify, resistance from various family members, racism and public ridicule. In the face of all this adversity, the team rises to the challenge and end up becoming the talk of the competition, winning all their critics over. The final scene with the guys carrying the sled to the finish line after crashing was a very powerful moment. It was this scene when everybody finally accepted them as winners. As a person with Jamaican roots, I would always get classmates singing the Jamaica We Have a Bobsleigh team song to me as a kid. And yes, if you're watching, Mark, I mean you. Cool Running sadly was the last movie the late actor John Kenny had completed before his death, 5 months after the film's release. He had a couple more films that came out following his death, but this movie was the last release whilst he was still alive. At just 43 years of age, it was a very shocking loss to the world indeed. Rest in peace, John, and thank you for the memories. If you follow this channel, then you'd know by now that there were two franchises that gripped my young days: Super Mario Bros. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The many video games and cartoons I was into, and now, the movies. 1993 saw the Turtles make their third and final outing on the big screen with the original Turtles cast. The Turtles have to travel back in time to rescue April O'Neil after she's accidentally teleported to the past via a magic golden scepter. An escaped Japanese prince, Kenshin, takes her place. Whilst there, they join forces with a local rebel group led by Mitsu, who is the love interest of Kenshin. They are taking on the Japanese Emperor Lord Norinaga, who happens to be the father of Kenshin. Oh, the drama. On top of that, they must retrieve the scepter from that time period in order to return home. As a kid, I did enjoy the movie and I watched it several times over, and at one point I actually thought it was better than the first two Turtles movies. Oh, what a young, naive fool I was. As an adult, the movie does not hold up well at all when you compare it to the other two. At this point in their long and storied history, the Turtles had been very much toned down when compared to their earlier outings. The Turtles had peaked in terms of popularity by this point, and this was like a final cash grab. The movie had a very kiddie vibe to it. There was no significant villains here. Casey Jones does return, but does no fighting this time around. Perspective changes with time, and watching it as an adult, it's definitely the weakest movie the Turtles ever had. And that even includes the Michael Bay movies. Then there was Super Mario Bros., as you've never seen them before. This wasn't no game, there was no mushrooms to get bigger, no flower power, no Toad. It was just two lads in plumber jumpsuits. The movie over the years gained a cult following and has become a classic of sorts. It failed at the box office, but that hasn't stopped fans rewatching this as something of a guilty pleasure. The late Bob Hoskins starred as Mario and John Leguizamo as Luigi. Actress Samantha Mantis portrayed Daisy, and late actor Dennis Hopper as Cooper. 1993 saw the release of The Three Musketeers, a live-action Disney adaptation of the 1844 novel by French writer Alexandru Dumas. This was a very star-studded lineup featuring Chris O'Donnell, Charlie Sheen, Tim Curry, and Mr. 24 Kiefer Sutherland. O'Donnell stars as the young would-be warrior D'Artagnan, eager to follow in the footsteps of his deceased father and become a musketeer. He travels to France in search of the musketeers who have been disbanded and banished under the authority of Tim Curry's Cardinal. The Cardinal's right-hand man, Rochefort, is the man behind D'Artagnan's father's murder, and a former musketeer before he betrayed his friends and joined up with the Cardinal. Captured and facing execution, D'Artagnan is rescued by the musketeers and then reveals the plot to assassinate the king by the Cardinal. The assassination is avoided when the musketeers are reunited as a whole and take on the Cardinal's army. With D'Artagnan avenging his father and the Cardinal meeting his demise, D'Artagnan is then made a fully fledged musketeer, fulfilling his destiny and carrying on his legacy whilst embracing that very famous quote.
All for one for all.
The movie didn't get good reviews, but personally I enjoyed it, and I feel it's a good entry into the list of 93 movies. There were plenty more movies to go through, but if I was to do a whole list, we would be here forever. That said, there are some other notable movies that were released this year. Other movies with varying levels of success, further adding to what was a splendid year of movies in the Hollywood box office. And on that note, we've come to the end of the first part of this video showcasing movies of this year. Up next, we delve into the year further, taking a look at all the TV shows and sitcoms that graced our TV screens. So do join me for the next video, for the second installment of...
It was the year 1993.